Wow. Hanji and Magath.
我々はイエーガー派に飛行艇を壊されたらおしまいなのだが、なぜ奴らはそうしない？
世界が滅べば失われた技術の再現に何十年とかかる。無人の大陸が欲しいのなら飛行艇はなおさら欲しいはず。
They have their use for it.
だけど、そんな彼らもここに私たちがいると分かる。
It's a new arrangement of this track.
即座に飛行艇を粉々にするだろう。その阻止は9つの巨人の力が困難だ。
Look at this.
だが、ここでつまずくようでは到底始祖にはかなうまい。
Whoa. Huh.
奴らを一瞬で皆殺しにする。飛行艇を確保するのはそれしかない。そのために巨人の力もあんたたちの武器もすべて使う。いいね。
ちょっと待てよ。
港を見境なく攻撃すればアズマ人まで巻き添えになる。
そうだ。
あんたの親戚も私たちにとっちゃ故郷を攻撃した敵なんだけど。いいや、アズマ人に死なれたら困るの、兄ちゃん。
本来の計画なら格納庫に入れて整備点検。飛行訓
Great
練の後
shot.
にようやく運用
But
に
you see the hesitation on that side, right?
それはどのくらい時間がかかる？
It's not just about the Azumabito, it's about...
わからない。
その上、邪魔をしてくるイエーガー派からは死傷者
Ha. She caught on
とでも言うつ
that they do have some hesitation. As expected, though.
出したくねえよ。訓練兵からの同期もいるんだぞ。
じゃあどうするの？教えてくれる？どうやって
Oh, Annie's
襲いかかる敵から死者を出さずにアルミ、私を追い詰めた時みたいに作戦を教えて。そんな作戦はない。一瞬で肩がつくか。
Oh boy.
しくじって飛行艇を
Yeah,
失
this is
う。
going to be...
あんたたちならあの日壁を壊すことを選ばなかっただろうね。私たちと違って。
やっぱり俺はお前と同じだ。
あれはそういうことか。お前たち4人は戦わなくていい。ガビとファルコと一緒に安全なところで見ていてくれ。イエーガー派に見つかればイヤガー王でも選択を迫られるだろう。ただし何も手出しするな。
沖で大量の蒸気を上げながら進む巨人が、
Wow.
その速度から推測するにすでにマーレ大陸には上陸している。
怖がらなくていい。殺しはしない。
Oh, he's heated, all right. Easy, easy. Don't get spotted.
昨夜の私の態度を詫びたい。我々は間違っていた。軽々しくも正義を語ったことだ。この後に及んでまだ自らを正当化しようとは、醜くもあがいた。卑劣なマーレスそのものである自分自身を直視することを恐れたからだ。君たちに責任はない。同じ民族という理由で過去の罪を着せられることは間違っている。
There it is. There it is.
ピーク。
This.
ライナー。
This.
お前たちも世界の憎しみを一身に背負う言われはないの血に濡れた愚かな歴史を忘れることなく後世に伝える責任はある。エレン・イエーガーは全てを消し去るつもりだ。それは許せない。
Animation's a bit off there.
愚かな行いから目をそらし続ける限り地獄は終わらない。だから頼む。我々の愚かな行いに今だけ目をつぶってくれ。
That takes a big man.
手も汚さず正しくあろうとするなんて。
Wow.
ただ世間が狭くなるだけのことです。何も変わらず同様の殺し合いを繰り返すことでしょう。
大事なのは
身の程をわきまえることです。わかりましたか？
奴ら鎧と一緒だ。海を泳いで逃げた。早くしないと逃げられる。今すぐ飛行艇が必要だ。
Now then, Flock.
急いでアズマビトに止めるようにさせろ。
Is he gonna buy this?
何を言っている？
フラック、急いでアズマビトの整備士を連れてくるんだ。
Don't think it's going to be that easy. Whoa! Blast from the past. I know these two.
実はお前たちがマーレとグルになってこの飛行艇を使って地ならしを止めようとしてるんじゃないかって疑いが。
そんなことやるわけねえだろ。
Oh wow.
そうだよ。エレンを止めたらこの島はどうなるんだよ。
だよな。俺たちせっかく助かるのにお前らがこの島をまた危険にするわけないよな。
Wow, this is an OG right here, man. Season 1.
当たり前だろ。
よかった。お前らが裏切ってたらどうしていいかわかんねえし。
Oh.
いいから早く爆弾を取ってくれよ。あとはフロックがアズマビトの整備士を
No, he's not gonna allow that.
くれれば完成した飛行艇にどうにかしてみんなを乗せてここを去る。すべて成功すれば無用な血は流れ。
Oh, there's going to be blood, all right.
やっぱり不安の種は積んでおくべきか。
Whoa. Did he just get jumped? Whoa, that's a lot of them, man.
失敗した。
Whoa! Flock just got tossed.
ただで死んでなるものか。
So she's trained. Here comes Mikasa. She's gonna try to take that approach Thoris took.
ミカサ、アルミン、コニー、エルディアを裏切った。殺せ。
こうなったらもうイエーガー派を殲滅するまでやるしか。ミカサ様。
Whoa.
アズマビト、地下で攻撃はしのぐ。生きたければついてこい。
Oh, this situation though, man. They go really far back, don't they? And Daz certainly rings a... Whoa.
裏切ったんだろう、コーニー。一緒に土地を増やして。
Sasha said that, right? Episode 4.
言ったのによ。
Top of the wall.
畜生。なんでこんな。
これでいい。
Old school track.
奴らは存分に
Iconic track.
下場のない地下にこもるつもりか。
Whoa! Here she comes.
まさか。
なぜこうなるんだ。
人から暴力を奪うことはできないよ。ねえ、兵長。
兵長。What? Whoa. Whoa. The return of the female titan. The founder Ymir is still making titans. And once again, flashbacks to season 1, Forest of the Giant Trees. OG Levi squad getting decimated by Annie. He's not gonna transform though, is he? He could have done it by now. Though that would kill too many.
裏切り者なんでだよ俺たちは仲間じゃないのかよお前たちは仲間だよでも俺は誰かがやらなくちゃいけないんだよやめ誰かが自分の手を血で染めないと
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one right there. You know, wow, the voice acting, you know, before I go any further, the voice acting on display here is just phenomenal. I mean, Connie's voice acting specifically in this situation, just incredible, really. You really feel that. And, you know, you really get the feeling that this incident here, this is the type of thing that haunts you forever, right? Speaking of both Connie and Armin in this situation. But, wow. You know, finding Connie in this dilemma, in this situation is, I mean, it's certainly incredibly sad, but it's certainly quite interesting as well, right? Given the nature of this story and how he might have found himself on the other side of that at one point, and now having gone through this experience himself, this heartbreaking experience, this, you know, haunting experience, he might actually have a better understanding for people like Bertolt and Reiner. I mean, you know, that's certainly one of the things that's at play here, you know, a parallel to season 2, episode 11. I mean, I'll get to that in a bit, but, you know, I kind of want to focus on this final scene. You see that Armin, he can't even speak, right? And, you know, in that sense, he kind of even looked like the Colossal Titan, right? The blood on his cheek. I mean, he got shot in the mouth. But yeah, I thought, you know, that's clearly quite deliberate that he kind of looks like the Colossal Titan in that moment. You know, that he is kind of one in the same as Bertolt, right? That Bertolt is still a part of him. But yeah, you know, it's funny how that kind of played out, right? Not funny in the sense that it's humorous, but, you know, ironic, I guess, that he's not able to speak. You know, who knows? Maybe something could have happened there. Maybe they could have talked it out. Maybe Armin could have said something, could have tried to, you know, calm Daz down. I don't know, man. That was really a difficult situation, right? And I think something like this, once again, was needed, right? That they do have connections to people that do happen to find themselves on that side, you know, the yeagerists. Right? You have Daz and Samuel here. I know Daz is also from, you know, the early days of Game of Thrones, Attack on Titan, Shingeki, but I can't quite pinpoint. I don't know. I'm just kind of drawing a blank. It's one of those rare moments. But, you know, Samuel, I remember. He was on top of the wall, right? It was him, Thomas, Mina, Connie, and Aaron, and Sasha, of course. It's a great moment, right? Great feel-good moment. I guess that's one of the iconic moments of my Shingeki reaction content, right? Me proclaiming that this is such a feel-good episode, right? And even Aaron felt like that, right? That, oh, okay, you know, humanity is finally getting their dignity back. You know, this is the beginning of the fight back for humanity. And then, of course, the Colossal Titan showed up at that exact moment. So yeah, you know, that whole emotion of that being a feel-good episode just immediately just you know, slap me in the face, smack me in the face. It's like, oh, you thought that was a feel-good moment, huh? Here, have some of this. But yeah, you know, those types of memories, you know, have a lot of vivid memories of the first season. But I am kind of drawing a blank on Daz. Yeah, I'll probably have to go look that up. But yeah, Samuel, I certainly remember. But you know, I immediately knew the moment I heard those two names, including Daz, that okay, I see the path this is about to head down, right? Or the really dark nature of it all that's about to play out here. because, you know, by introducing these characters that have a connection to our main cast, it allowed for some of that tension, allowed for some of that, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't angle of this all. And again, I felt that their hesitation was certainly, I think it was necessary. I really do feel like that was a necessary thing they had to depict at this point. You know, earlier you see our 104th, and of course Samuel and Daz are also OG 104th. So again, bringing them in at this point, it was certainly quite effective, right? Because if you just have a bunch of yeagerists that don't have much of an association or connection to the characters and the audience, then, you know, it's kind of like this faceless, emotionless faction, essentially. You know, of course, there's a lot of red shirts, and I saw a lot of them on the rooftop, and a lot of those red shirts got massacred, essentially. They were handled. And, you know, before I go any further, you know, I was really quite excited. I was really quite excited to see the Titan transformations once again, and they certainly made a big deal of it, right? The presentation of it all, right? It was certainly treated as a big deal. You know, the reemergence of the armored Titan and the female Titan, right? It was a big deal to see them on screen again. So I was certainly excited about that. And of course, you know, both Reiner and Annie swinging in using ODM gear, that in itself is quite a great moment, actually, right? Call back to some of the early days of Shingeki, right? So to see them back, you know, in ODM gear and transforming, of course, you know, there's a hit of nostalgia there for sure. So it's exciting, right? And of course, the presentation of it certainly elicits excitement, right? No doubt about it. So that's the element I was excited about, right? I was not excited about the things that kind of played out after that. You know, I wasn't happy to see these people die. You know, yes, yeagerists, but you know, as they adequately kind of established in this episode, you know, not all the yeagerists are kind of like Flock, right? I'll get to Flock in a bit, but you know, there is this notion that Flock kind of gives all of the yeagerists bit of a reputation, right? Yes, I mean, you know, it's kind of tough, right? Because the yeagerists do stand for something that is really quite, I mean, it's tough to argue against the fact that the thing they stand for is really quite dark. Yes, you know, there's a whole angle that they're fighting for their freedom, that they're fighting the people that would have them exterminated. I mean, there are other individuals in that group that are nice people, that are good people. I mean, you know, as I say that, you know, I remember the thing they stand for, but hopefully you know what I mean, right? You know, people like Samuel and Daz, they are good people by nature. They just are, you know, they're good friends. They go way back. You know, Armin and Connie and Daz and Samuel, they're from the, you know, iconic days of the 104th. They came up together. They have a lot of history together. So, you know, here it's showing us that, you know, it's not as easy as just, you know, killing all the yeagerists, right? It's just not. You know, Annie certainly felt like it might be, right? But then she was also open to their perspective. And by their perspective, I mean, you know, the 104th, you see that even Mikasa was quite, she was hesitating, right? She had a hesitation. You have Mikasa, you have Jean, Connie, Armin, all of them had hesitation about this. And I think that is realistic. It just is, right? That they do have connections, even if, you know, some of them end up being on the Jaegerist side, they have long-time connections to some of these individuals. So you see that they certainly wanted to try something else first, right? They didn't want to jump to that just yet. You see Connie is certainly quite agitated about this notion or idea that, you know, even though they're trying to save people, they have to go kill people that they consider friends, right? And ultimately, how sad that he is the one who ends up killing both Samuel and does get blood on his hands. And of course, it's quite a poignant moment that in that moment in time, or at that moment in time, he remembers Bertolt, right? And the thing he said to them in season 2, episode 11, right? Someone has to get blood on their hands. Someone has to do it. But, you know, in that sense, it's like a direct parallel to that episode a bit earlier as well, right? You know, he was the one in Samuel and Daz's position at that point, right? But yeah, at that moment in time, in season 2, episode 11, Connie was the one who legitimately felt betrayed, right? And like from his heart, he's asking Bertolt, right? Was everything a lie, right? Didn't all of us promise each other to grow old together and go out for drinks, right? Same thing happened here, right? It came full circle. Now Connie finds himself on the other end of that. You have Samuel here who's kind of saying the same thing, right? Didn't all of us agree? Didn't all of us make a promise to, have lands and eat meat together? And of course, the fact that Connie remembers, he certainly, I mean, they didn't allude to it in this, but of course, you can kind of infer that of course Connie remembers that Sasha said that all that time ago as well, in season 1, episode 4. And yeah, it was like this bonding moment up on top of the wall. And I believe Sasha even saved Samuel, didn't she? But that was in episode 4. That was the next episode, episode 5, the infamous episode 5 of Shingeki no Kyojin. I think she shot him, right? She shot him through the leg. But then you see that this whole time later, now it's Connie who has to kind of kill Samuel. And I think it's just incredibly heartbreaking to see Connie in that situation. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see Samuel and Daz in that situation as well, of course. But, Connie's been through it, man. He's really been through it. He's the one who's been really jaded, right? You go back to him kind of grabbing Anya Capone and telling him about all the betrayals he's felt, that he's had so much of that, right? There's only so much he can take. Now he's on the other end of it. I mean, the notion or the idea of perspective certainly plays a major part in this episode. As I mentioned earlier, Connie most definitely understands Reiner and Bertolt at this point. In that sense, I don't know if there's only 2 episodes left, but even a quick moment of Connie and Reiner together, some kind of scene, some type of scene, I think that could be beneficial. I would love to see it, right? Connie and Reiner speaking once again. Or having a moment. And, speaking of Reiner, you see that, perspective certainly played a part for him as well, right? You see in that moment as Annie is essentially once again kind of dehumanizing herself, right? That, she was able to kind of go through with it, even though it was Reiner who asked them or kind of, implored them to go through with it. She still believes that, these people are really different from me. And she tells them, I'm pretty sure you guys probably wouldn't have been able to do it, right? Take the wall down, destroy the wall. So, that whole notion of Annie kind of dehumanizing herself still kind of continues, right? She's certainly tough on herself. But at that exact moment, Reiner came to realize just exactly the thing Eren meant all that time ago, right? In Liberia. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago, right? In that basement, in Declaration of War, season 4, episode 5, he has yet another layer of understanding about Eren in that moment, right? As I thought, I'm the same as you, right? He understands that Eren also had selfish reasons or selfish notions, that Eren is doing this for his own selfish reasons, be it to protect his own friends, be it to protect the island of Paradis, right? And not care about anything else. Also, the notion that because of his actions, he kind of forced the rest of Paradis essentially to come into Liberio and join in on this thing he kind of put into motion, right? The attack essentially. So he understood, right, that Eren also had his own selfish reasons, much like Reiner had his own selfish reasons for continuing the attack on the walls. And I really like that moment as Reiner kind of steps up and tells them, they don't have to do this, that they should hang back, right? Because if they get in there, they are going to be in a situation that is going to force them to fight the yeagerists. And the yeagerists have people they know. I mean, all of us know that Armin was not going to sit back, right, as this kind of plays out, as they go out there and get in this firefight, essentially. He wanted to try something. He wanted to take a different approach, and he certainly took it, right? He tried. It was certainly always going to be a futile attempt, given how clever Flock is. He is an intelligent individual. It's a long story, of course. He's had that life-altering experience. And, in that sense, you see that Armin and Flock are kind of connected in the sense that they both have survivor's guilt, right? Don't they? And you see that both of them kind of process it in these opposing methods, right? Or they utilize different approaches in handling it. You have Armin who kind of internalizes it or has internalized it. And then you have Flock who deals with this or has dealt with this externally, right? Like I mentioned before, Flock has decided that he's never ever going to allow any external forces to ever put him in a position like that ever again, right? Going back to the perfect game, and the hellish and the nightmarish experience of that, right? Charging into their death, their almost confirmed death. But of course, Flock ended up surviving. Though, of course, that is also because he kind of ducked under, right? He was trying to dodge all those projectiles. But even then, the chances of actually surviving that was so slim, right? So he was given this chance. And you see that Flock has certainly taken that second chance by the scruff of the neck, right? And he's gone like all in, right? But on the other end, like I mentioned, Armin has kind of internalized it. He's really down on himself, and they kind of got into that a few episodes ago, right? Him really having this low opinion of himself, right? And that he does think that they made the wrong choice by bringing him back rather than the late great Commander Smith. I mean, that final scene is it's a gut punch. It really is. It's really tough. It's a really tough situation. I was kind of speechless in that moment. I had nothing to say. I'm just kind of looking on as this really sad situation is playing on. Ultimately, I guess Samuel and Daz's hesitation allowed Armin and Connie to kind of stay alive there, right? You have one of their most important assets, Armin and the Colossal Titan, at gunpoint, right? That is a really, really difficult situation. That's a really bad situation for them to be in, right? To have him at gunpoint. And of course, Armin cannot transform in that moment, because if he does, he destroys the boat, he kills Connie, and he kills Samuel and Daz anyways. And then, of course, they've shown us that his transformation is essentially like a nuke going off. So, that whole area would have been just leveled, right? Again, I guess I still don't know how come his transformation is so different from Bertolt's. I guess maybe it does come down to experience. And, they actually did set that up in Season 4, Part 1, right? In that dossier scene in The Door of Hope. That Bertolt is quite experienced, right? That he has quite a bit of control over the Colossal Titan, right? The God of War. Or was it the Lord of Destruction? Or the God of Destruction? Yes, the God of Destruction. But yeah, I guess I had a bit of a brain fart moment, because I thought maybe Armin could transform, but he's making the choice not to. Of course, that wasn't even an option, right, to transform. Now, speaking of a matter of perspective, that brings me to the title of the episode, Traitor, right? I mean, this is a term that certainly has quite a negative connotation attached to it. That's just how it is, right? No doubt about it. Once again, I do think it's a matter of perspective here, right? Because, are you inherently bad or a terrible person just because you've been called a traitor or you've been perceived as a traitor? Because, a traitor from one side could be deemed a hero from another side for making that choice in the first place, right? I really do think it's a matter of perspective. Let's look at Samuel and Daz. From their perspective, from their angle, yes, this betrayal certainly cuts deep, and it certainly feels real to them. For them, it legitimately feels like a betrayal that, that Armin and Connie, though I think most of this focus was on Connie, right? As it was kind of like a back and forth, Samuel and Connie. But yeah, from their perspective, this feels like betrayal. I think it's valid. Their perspective is certainly valid here. But that doesn't mean that Connie is inherently a bad person or a terrible person. Of course not, right? Look at it from another perspective. From Connie's angle, he's, even as tough as it is, right? It really is quite a heartbreaking moment for Connie. But, from his perspective, he's cutting ties with people or a group that kind of stands for the wrong things, right? They perceive it to be the wrong things. I know, there's always that notion of the yeagerists and that ideology believing in their survival and fighting for their freedom and fighting for that survival from the outside world coming for them. Yes, that's always there. But from this newly formed alliances perspective, those people are in the wrong, right? They just are. And, Connie happens to be part of that alliance. So yeah, again, it's not as clear cut as them just being traitors. And listen, before I go any further, I know for a fact that, people might come into the comments and say, no, Connie and all of them are traitors. That's a fact. That's an objective truth, right? Yes, maybe maybe for the people who support the Jaegerists, fans of Flock, yes, I can see that, for you or to you, yes, all of them are traitors to Paradis, right? But again, that's a perspective. If you choose to have that be your perspective, that you do side with Flock and the Jaegerists, then okay. I mean, it's just not as clear cut as that, though, right? I mean, nothing's clear cut. Nothing as simple. There's nothing as simple as good and evil here. Essentially, at this point in time, everyone is a traitor to someone else. Everyone has blood on their hands. It's just, no one is morally above anyone else at this point. Ultimately, you have this group of individuals who kind of came together in this newly formed alliance, and they believe this is the right thing to do, right? That genocide and, mass extinction is just not the right thing here. Right? That's just not something you can tolerate or justify. And listen, they know they might be ultimately dooming Paradis in the long run, right? They know this. They're not delusional. Like I mentioned, people like Jean and Hanji accept that, right? Yet they still make that choice. That should tell you just how much this kind of means to them, making this choice, right? They know this could lead to them dying anyways down the line, right? Not just them, the island being decimated and the world actually coming back for them at some point, yet they still make that choice. And listen, I get that some people might say it's just stupid, the whole idea, that whole notion is stupid, that they're, actively kind of playing a part in the destruction of Paradis at some point anyways, but it's just not realistic to expect everyone to just turn a blind eye to that, to the notion, to this insane idea that everyone outside of Paradis is going to die, right? This mass extinction, essentially, that everyone's going to get murdered, and that only they have the right to live. It's just not realistic. Come on, you cannot expect every single character to think like that. Right? You cannot expect everyone to think like Flock and some of the Jaegerists. And listen, like I was alluding to earlier, I wasn't excited about the Jaegerists, even if they are red shirts, getting, decimated by the Armored and the female Titan. I mean, Annie specifically, like I mentioned, memories of Forest of the Giant Trees and the OG Levi squad getting absolutely decimated and crushed and massacred, right? I mean, it really was starting to feel like that once again. I mean, there is no holding back here, right? She made sure to take them out. And as you may have noticed, I wasn't cheering any of that on or anything because I didn't have that urge, right? I didn't have that natural inclination to cheer this moment. I just didn't. Seeing people die like that is just not something I can really cheer on. I just didn't have the urge to do it. Right? It just wasn't there. It kind of goes back to that incredible episode, right? Season 3, episode 10, Friends. And that notion of the miracle, right? That miracle that happened. You see that this newly formed alliance kind of hoped for a similar miracle, that they could kind of do this without any bloodshed, right? Without any violence. Yet the one ultimate truth, the one unavoidable truth of the world is that violence is in human nature, right? It just is. Now, let me take another angle here to the Daz, Samuel, Connie, and Armin situation. What if instead of Samuel or instead of Daz, it was a really prominent character, right? I think that could have been quite an interesting setup, right? If indeed it was one of the main cast that ended up kind of, joining the Jaegerists, then that scene becomes even more poignant, doesn't it? Then that scene becomes something else entirely, doesn't it? And I'm speaking of someone from the main cast. If they were able to kind of switch sides and then, they found themselves at odds in that moment. Imagine a death at that moment, right? That would be that could have been one of the biggest moments of the series, right? If there was a major death at that moment. But as I say that, I'm thinking of who possibly, purely hypothetical, of course, who possibly could have been on the other side of Connie at that moment, and Connie ended up shooting, or Connie ended up getting shot, maybe, right? You never know. But as I'm thinking of possibilities, it just doesn't feel like any of our main cast could have really shifted to the Jaegerists, right? I don't know, man. They alluded to Jean having some doubts, but again, at no point did I think, or did any of you probably think, that Jean is going to, stay with the Jaegerists. No chance in hell. No chance. I know Jean Boy inside and out. All of us know Jean Boy inside and out at this point. He was not going to jump ship. But, you know, as a hypothetical, imagine if it was one of the main cast that was on the opposing end, right? At that point in time, instead of Samuel or Daz. That could have been quite the moment for the series, right? But yeah, just like a what if scenario I kind of had in my mind. But you know, going back to Flock, I don't think fans of Flock are going to like, or I mean, I'm watching this long after most of you have seen it. I don't think many of the Flock fans would have liked him getting tossed, judo tossed essentially by Kiyomi Asumabito, right? But you know, in that sense, surely she's trained. That's the only explanation here. She has to be trained, right? That's the only realistic explanation for this. And it, you know, it's not far-fetched to think that she is trained, right? And I think that's probably one of the reasons Flock was kind of caught off guard, because he probably didn't think that, you know, this older lady is trained in any, you know, CQC or any hand-to-hand combat. Listen, man, as I'm on the topic of Flock, you see that Isayama-san himself has certainly painted Flock in a really specific light, right? You cannot ignore it. You just can't. You know, in that sense, he's kind of become this Bond villain almost, right? He certainly has that feel about him. But, you know, even though Flock is kind of being painted in that light, in a really specific negative light, you know, it hasn't stopped people from actually siding with Flock, right? And kind of understanding his stance. And, you know, I certainly understand his stance as well. I do. That they do want to fight for survival, and they do want to put an end to anyone who wants to put an end to them. And, you know, I've always maintained that Flock is a necessary character. I've maintained that since season 3, part 2. I actually really like Flock. But unfortunately, the thing that happened here is that he let the power get to him, right? He has become a really hateful and a terrible person. He has. I don't think anyone can deny that, right? That's the thing I don't like about Flock anymore, right? I can appreciate the character of Flock, and I certainly, I certainly felt that it's a necessary character and it's a necessary perspective to have. And even now, I think that perspective is necessary to have. Doesn't mean it's the right thing, but it's still necessary to have. But the problem here is that Flock has really changed as an individual, as a person, right? He has become a terrible person. He just has. I don't think anyone can argue against that. He's become a shithead. But, all of that being said, this felt like a cliffhanger, and this fight, this, battle is going to continue into the next episode, most likely, right? It feels like it's just beginning. So yeah, I'm going to see Flock out there, and I have no doubts that he's going to fight for his cause, right? And in fact, I want to see him fight for his cause. I could tell you right now, if Flock was to get cut down or anything, and, to be realistic, I don't expect Flock to, be one of the survivors or anything. I feel like sooner or later he is going to die. It's just kind of one of those things. A character like him is going to meet his end at some point. But say he was to get cut down or something was to happen to him and he dies, you're not gonna find me cheering that on. You're just not. As I explained earlier, I just don't have that urge to cheer that on, right? I can already tell. I would not cheer on any potential death. Right? I don't agree with the person he's become. Yes, he's become a terrible person. I still wouldn't kind of cheer on his death, though. I just wouldn't. Now then, let me get to one of the biggest moments of the series. And, yes, I use this term quite a bit, but I really do think it's a monumental moment of the series. You have someone like Magath, right? Someone who is a prominent outsider and quite a high-ranking official. You have him apologizing to the people of Paradis, right? By name. Armin, Mikasa, Connie, all of them. Jean, he turns to the warrior crew. He apologizes to them for their treatment and for all the hate they had to carry on their backs all this time, right? I thought that was an incredible moment. It really was. Listen, I'm not going to go out and say that, okay, he's been redeemed or anything. Of course, there's notions of a redemption arc there for sure. Of course, it'd be a stretch to say that he's been completely redeemed or anything. But, that in itself, the fact that he is apologizing to them, he is, owning up to the mistakes. Not just of his mistakes. Again, that whole notion of him being this prominent outsider, right? He represents a lot. Right, he represents Marley at this point in time. He just does, right? And he's the one who is owning up to these mistakes. He's the one who's apologizing. He's the one who's realizing that, it was always wrong to put these children into this position, right? To me, him turning to the warrior crew was actually even more of a moment, right? especially given his relation to them, right? You know, this isn't out of the blue. It's just not out of the blue, right? You see, even at the campfire, he apologizes for his actions and his behavior from last night. That was him almost kind of putting on an act, right? It was a facade almost, kind of, you know, playing the part. Because, and I say it's not out of the blue, because, you know, that was one of the reasons I liked Magath in the first place in season 4, part 1, right? His attitude towards Eldians, his attitude towards these warrior children, right? Or these children that are in this warrior program. I liked him because he was different, because he showed a different side, because he had a semblance of empathy towards the Eldians. He did. You go to great moments like him and Tiber in the buggy, right? Him showing concern for the residents of Liberio, the Eldians of Liberio, you know, putting them at risk, putting them in harm by, you know, staging this potential fight or this potential retaliation by Eren Yeager. You know, that was legitimate concern. But then, of course, you know, you see Tiber, he gets quite heated, right? He's like, oh, it's fine, right? Because all of us are devils, right? They're all devils, right? It should be fine. You know, it's one of those standout moments as Tiber kind of stands up and you know, Magath kind of looks him right in the eye, you know, and Tiber sits down again. But, you know, Magath's always kind of maintained. It was actually in that scene as well, you know, that Eldians are devils and Marleyans are devils, right? As they shook hands after that, I believe. You know, look at his reaction to seeing Gabby. You know, he gives her a hug. Look at his reaction at finding out that Falco ingested some of Zeke's spinal fluid. He was just devastated. Remember? That was a point I made, that he looked like a parent, like a dad who just found out that his son is you know, potentially going to die really soon, right? A horrific death in that sense. He treated a lot of them with respect, right? He would listen to some of these experienced warriors such as Reiner and Peak. I mean, he has great respect for Peak. He really does. So I really don't think this is out of the blue. I think this is just kind of like the tipping point. You know, he realized, especially after seeing Gabby once again, right? And he realized, okay, no, you know, he's got to own up to this. He's got to stop this cycle of hatred, that he has to play his part in stopping this cycle of hatred, right? This history of violence. You know, there's that notion that history is actually a narrative, right? One that is carefully shaped and curated, right? Rather than truthfully presented and learned from. And under the pen strokes of the right scribe, you know, a hero can become a villain, or a villain can become a hero, or the lie becomes the truth, or the truth becomes the lie. And that, you know, and that has certainly played a part in this story of Shingeki, hasn't it? Be it, you know, the Eldian Empire, right? The Restorationists take on the Eldian Empire. And then you have characters like Helos, right? That are certainly a narrative creation, right? So you have Magath here who doesn't want any of that. He thinks it's their duty to remember this stupid bloodstained history, right? As he called it. And it's their, you know, responsibility to teach it to future generations, all right? To stop this from happening again, to stop this silly cycle of hatred and violence, right? Unfortunately, you know, it's a bit of a futile thought, essentially, given human nature. And, you know, you have to look no further than our own real life history and things that are playing out right at this moment. That notion of, you know, the one thing all of us know from history is the fact that people don't learn from history, right? So yeah, you know, ultimately perhaps it's a futile attempt, but it's, you know, this moment of clarity, this really prominent figure saying this, it's an incredible moment of the series. It's a monumental moment of the series. You know, him apologizing, him accepting that this was all wrong, right? To put Eldians in this position, to put children in this position. Listen, I'm sure I'm going to get some comments about Magath and, you know, how despicable he might be and the things he's done. But listen, he's apologizing. He's owning up to it. This is a start, right? This is, you know, doesn't mean he's completely redeemed himself or anything, but it's a start, right? He's accepting his mistake. And it circles back to the great Mr. Browse, right? That notion of the forest and keeping the children out of the forest, and it's their duty and responsibility to keep the children out of the forest, right? These conflicts and hatred of the past have certainly kept people in the forest, but, you know, now he's the one putting it out there as well, right? And he's accepting it, that it's their duty to make sure that future generations are not affected by this, that they do not carry the seeds of hatred with them, right? So yeah, I thought it was a great moment. I really thought it was a big moment for the series. But that being said, that's the tragic nature of this, right? By stopping the Stampede of the Titans, they do kind of doom Paradis, right? Because the seeds of hatred are going to continue outside of Paradis, right? There's certainly reason for that to happen outside of Paradis, right? Given the things Eren Yeager has put into motion. And speaking of that, through a Hanji, they've kind of confirmed that he's probably made ground at this point, that he's probably touched Marley at this point. He's reached Marley at this point. So, they're underwater, essentially. So are they kind of walking at the base of the ocean, at the floor of the ocean? I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's practical, is it? Are they swimming? Or, just kind of thinking of that, it's a little bit goofy to think that these, colossal titans are swimming. I mean, they're underwater, so they're doing something, swimming or just kind of walking at the base of the ocean. But yeah, I thought, once again, Isayama-san's kind of reiterating that message of his. It's a strong warning against propaganda and hate. One of those messages, or one of his messages at least, I think. But yeah. And I've got to say, it was quite the sight to see Magath in the wings of freedom in that jacket. I mean, that's certainly quite a symbolic moment as well, right? To have someone like Magath have that moment and then have the wings of freedom on his back. Yeah. And he kind of, circles back to the meaning of that, right? The wings of freedom. But yeah, I think that's about it for this one. Yeah, I think this comment section might be an interesting one. I certainly think so. But I'm open to it. Give me your thoughts. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. As long as it doesn't get too crazy and doesn't start going into spoilers and all of that, give me your thoughts. If you're interested in full length and full opacity, and the full opacity is quite high quality, if I do say so, consider checking out the Patreon page, and the link for that is in the description, in the pinned comment. And also there's a link to my social media, Twitter specifically, if you're into that. Right then, that's about it for this one. Just the 2 episodes left. I'm really quite excited to see how it ends off and the point it ends off on, right? I'm sure it's going to be quite the cliffhanger. And as of this point, I do know that it is going to be a part 3 and not a film, right? So that was quite a surprise, actually. I mean, a pleasant surprise. I was quite happy to hear about this, that it is going to conclude in episodic format, right? I'm sure many of you were quite excited to hear about that as well. But again, part of me is still kind of wondering what the film could have been like, in a theater. That could have been quite an incredible experience. But ultimately, I am happy that it is going to end off as a part 3. How many episodes it might end up being, I'm really quite happy about that. And that's meant to be 2023, and I'll be really happy to be sharing that content. Right then, that's about it for this one. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for your time. And I do hope to see you again soon for these last few episodes. So until then, take it easy.